Hi, this is Ismail from IMGS. Uh, Today I will show you the FME data virtualization. So FME data virtualization was introduced in FME Flow version 2025. Data virtualization provides the ability to expose the data set as an API, published the data virtualization as a RESTful API, which provides the ability to send the request and get the response. A request could be of a get method, post method, uh, delete, put method, a general web type request, and you can get in response you will get the JSON response, XLS response, or PDF, or any type of data that you are expecting as a response through the process. So when you log into the FME Flow and click on the data virtualization, you'll get this page on the screen. This provides the ability to import the data virtualization API created on another server, to load it into another server, export and import. The create API provides the mechanism to create a new API for the data processing. I am in now create API. This will provide the functionality and inputs to give the parameters for writing a new API. So API title and namespace should be unique. So for the purpose of demo, I'm just giving FME DV1. Leave the other parameter security and caching and default, and click on the create. This will create a skeleton API. Now go to the roles and create a new role, and I'll give FME role as a name of the role, and I'll give the data virtualization API access, and I'll give very specific data virtualization that we just created, and I'll give the other access to run the workspaces. Create, click on the create button. This will create a role, and now I'll create a user with this role. I'll select this role that we created in the previous step. I'll give the password, confirm password, and give you need to give the name of the user. So I'll just give FME user1 and say create. So this will create the user with the DV role. Now I'll come back to the security of the API, assign the role that we created. So once we assign the role, it will work with that role or the users. If I would have given the user also, it will restrict to the user also. Currently I'm saying that any user having FME role should be able to access the API that we created. Go to the endpoint, and I'll create a general tag and a service tag, and I'll create the two endpoint API for demonstration purpose. So I'll just create a general, and I'll create another tag services. I'll detail out shortly. Now I'll create a one endpoint and assign the tag general tag to that API. So this is a common status API to inquire that the API server is running, and I'll assign the general tag. And I'll use manual instead of workspace based processing, and I'll say OK. and just description as success. Content type I'll give as application JSON, and in the message body response message I'll say status okay and message successful or API running. So I'll say API service is running. Okay. Once this is created, this particular API is ready, and I'll create the another API to get the users information. But this API I'll use with the workspace base, and I'll detail out the difference between manual and the workspace at later part of this demonstration. And I'll assign this one as API services. Now this one I'm assigning as a tag API service because it's going to read the data and response to the user. So that's why I'm distinguishing between the two. And I'll create the workspace. I'll say status code success 200 success. And in this one, I would like to return the schema based information back to the user. So I'll create a response schema called response users, and I'll create a JSON structure for that schema. So it will return the array object because the response data may contain more than one user. So I'll create an array of users, and within that array, it will return objects of user information. So let's say for testing purpose, I'll just put first name, last name, and country. So these three information I'll supply, and all three is of a string type. Click on create. So this will create an schema, and on success, it will return as a response JSON. I'll create that. Now you can see the workspace assign is unassigned. It's showing unassigned. uh, I will go and create a new workspace and author that workspace. So I, this is how we can create. So currently there is no workspace associated. We will generate a workspace. Okay. So I'll give a name get underscore blah blah underscore users create. So once I created, it says need authoring. So next step is to author the workspace within FME Forms. So I'll go to FME Forms, connect to the FME Flow, and download that data virtualization workspace created from FME Flow. So each FME workspace comes that for authoring will have the request path and the response path. Request path is that comes along with the request header into the workspace, and based on the request parameters, things get processed, and as a response, it goes back to the user on the front end side. So I'll for just testing purpose, I'll just create a response information without putting any further detail. So it's a simple process. I'll put attribute creator, assign that attribute creator, and create three basic information that has to go. The success, the code, a return code of the process. So I'll say it's a success one, which is 200. That is 200. So status code as 200. Uh, as we have we have created the API, we have given that the response will be application JSON. So I will type the response body dot content type as the application JSON. And in res and in response body content, I'll create the JSON data. This response JSON matching the schema that we created while creating the API endpoint. First name, last name, and country. And as a dummy, I have given test, and Ireland as a country. I'll say OK, OK, OK. And I'll connect this to response port. Once this is done, this needs to be published back to the FME flow. So this publish and normal workspace publish is different. In workspace publish, you get a other prompt, what type of service you want to publish as a workspace. Whereas in this one, it's just a data virtualization service. Once the workspace is published, you'll will once we refresh the workspace tab, it will say workspace is assigned and is functional now. We'll move to the testing part of the data virtualization. So first we have created in general tag, another one we created in the service tag. So click on this link, view documentation. It will open the Swagger to test the API that we created within the FME flow. So this is the URL that needs to be shared with the front end developer that will be called to get the data or check the status. So I'll use the Swagger to test for status. So I'll say try it out and execute. On success, if it is success, it will say API service is running. So it's saying API services is running. Okay. This indicates the API server or FME flow is functioning to call the API. I have logged out from the FME DV user from this current session and I'll execute again. And although I have logged in the FME flow with the admin user, it's prompting because we in creating during the workspace creation, we have given the role FME DV user. Okay, so currently I have logged in as admin and this one is assigned to run. So this provides the ability to provide security to your API that even the admin cannot run because we have not authorized admin to access this API. So we can change the security of the each endpoint by going to security and editing. So currently we have given both the API authenticate and inherit from the API. So for testing purpose, I'll say status should get run unauthenticated. So anybody can access that status because it does not do anything. It just inquire the FME flow is running or not. Now, if I'll click again with authentication, it will show API service is running. If I'll click on the get user and try it out, execute, it will prompt me for the user. I'll give the user and the password that is having assigned with the role, FMEDV role that has access to this endpoint API. So now you can see that it has written the data in JSON format, Ireland, last name, first name, and that's how we have configured the response schema. That's all from for time. As a summary for data virtualization, it's just a 3 or 4 steps task. First, you create the API and then assign the security as a start point for that API by creating a role and creating a user and assigning the role to the API. Once the API is created, you need to create the endpoints. An endpoint could be of a two type with the workspace or a without workspace. So without workspace that we have seen the manual one for status, and with workspace we have seen for get users. So the next stage is after creating the endpoint, you need to assign the response schema and create the workspace. Once the workspace is authored from the FME forms, publish it. Once the workspace is published, the API endpoint is available to test through the Swagger documentation within the FME flow. And if the security is required to be authenticated, even though your current session is login with admin, but admin is not having the access to run that endpoint API, it will prompt you to log in with the correct users and password. And once the user and password is applied, you will be able to run the endpoint API and get the data as a response. So this is the simple two endpoint API I have shown, but you can do much more with the data virtualization using the post method to create the data, using the delete method to delete the data, and using the put method to update an existing data. That's all for now, and we'll see in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.